Yama, hello and welcome to Blacademia. Joining me today is my dear friend, Dr. Lauren Tynan. Welcome to Blacademia, Lauren.
Thanks, Amy.
So I was thinking to start, I'd get you to introduce yourself.
So I'm Lauren. I'm a Pairrebenne Trawlwoolway woman from Tebrakunna Country, which is part of the Coastal Plains Nation in what is now known as Trouwerner or Lautrewita or Tasmania up in the northeast. And I grew up and live on beautiful Awabakal country.
We're very lucky to be regional neighbours. And I have a confession to make. I don't really know what you do. Like, I'm very familiar with writing and I love it. But your role within the academy, what's it called? Like, what department are you in? Like, what do you do? I know what your reading feels like and reads like, but from a systems standpoint, what are you doing?
So I am currently a research fellow in the discipline of geography and planning at Macquarie University, but I have a confession to make too. Before I started my PhD, I didn't know what geography was. So I had previously been associated with the social sciences and that sort of area, of which geography is a part of that. But I came into geography relationally through my supervisors and ended up there. I never studied it in high school. I didn't know what it was until I was in the thick of it. And that actually was really cool because I could sort of look at it and go, what's going on here? And what are they all talking about? And why does so much of it sound like blackfella stuff, but there aren't many blackfellas in this space? So
Yeah, right.
Very interesting.
And I think that part of what has confused me, because Lauren and I have been friends for years, and although we've never worked together, we've often worked in parallel ways. And the first time we ever met was at like a HDR conference, which is like a gathering of people doing their masters or PhDs, and we were at one specifically for mob. But you work in like human geography. And I'm like, I just thought geography was like the names of the country and maps. I didn't realize that there were other elements to it.
Yes, there are many different types of geography. So the main split comes because in some institutions, so again, this is a systems institution Western knowledge problem, they separated out physical geography from the more human social science geography. Some places it's still the same. So you still have people doing surveying and lots of those more physical things. But in places like Macquarie University and other departments, it's more human geography focused. So it's really about people and place. And so I think for me, why it really resonates to be in this area of geography is because as a black fella, like all my work is about people and place. It's about kin and it's about country and it's about how we do that together.
And I think for me, that is what I was struggling to get my head around, the idea, and I think there isn't a huge awareness of this in the academy, but those concepts, the idea of people and place actually being one in the same in a lot of ways is ancestral concepts for us. So I think it was that recognition that I really struggled with. So Lauren and I were PhD candidates at the same time, and I was technically ahead in terms of like the timing of my PhD, but Lauren is a writing machine. Like, actually, no, that's an uncharitable way to put it because there's nothing mechanical machine about the way that you write. You write so beautifully, but what I mean is you're like a writing powerhouse. And so you were published far and away ahead of me, even though I was closer to submission than you. And I say this to contextualize that one of your publications is one of my all-time favorite publications in the academy. And it came out at just the perfect time for my PhD journey because my PhD, I yarned with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women or people who would be identified as women within the binary of the academy and how they do numbers. And I asked them why they're academics. And everyone in my study is de-identified because of lots of reasons, and it was part of the ethical approval. But it meant that my PhD holds these incredible quotes and stories, and it kind of, to me, it feels like it sings. And I love my doctoral thesis. I think it's really beautiful, but it feels like because only my name is on it, like I get credit for the words and the beauty and the heart of the women who shared with me. And I was really struggling with that at the end when I was writing the last parts of the thesis, and I was trying to think, how do I say that the thesis feels alive? How do I say that it feels similar to having children, that, you know, you technically made it, or you technically came in and put all this effort and energy into raising it, but when it does something wonderful, like when your publication goes well, when your child achieves something, although you're part of it, it felt like an entity separate and part of me. And so I was just going to share a little bit of the paper that I'm talking about, which for me just came in at the right time, because I thought, oh, how do I articulate this? I don't know how. And then a new publication came out from Lauren, and I was able to say, I don't have to come up with how to say it because you had said it so beautifully. This is from Lauren's publication, Thesis as Kin, Living Relationality with Research, which was published in 2020. I'm just going to read a little bit of the abstract. As a Trawlwoolway woman of Tebrakunna Country, Australia, I invite scholars to embrace research and writing as kin, extending an ethic of relational accountability to all relations, including the thesis. Thesis as kin derives from an Aboriginal ontological translation of the English, originally Latin word thesis, broken into two parts, the, sis, revealing the short form for sister, sis, as the primary entity. And as soon as I read that, I was like, all right, we're on here. This is going to be that missing piece that I needed to articulate how I was feeling. And one of the things that I strove for in my own thesis was to cite blackfellas, to bring our work in as much as possible. And it was such a pleasure to be able to bring that work into my own. And yet this was one of your first publications, and it's so meaty and incredible. And did you want to speak to that paper at all?
Sure. Yeah, so I did a thesis by publication. So I knew from pretty early on that pretty much all the writing I was going to do was going to be for publication. So it was written in that format, and I knew that it would come together. Also, another insight into why there were so many publications is because during the time of my PhD, I had 2 babies. So I went on, many bouts of leave, and those publications I had written sort of got closed off, sent out into the publishing ether. And then when I came back, like a year later after a baby, they were sort of in the world. So that's how that came about. So Thesis as Kin, really in that early days of the PhD, I was just spending a lot of time reading, making notes and walking. And at the time I was living on Trawlwoolway Country, and I was spending a lot of time down by the coast, down by the estuary, and really just sitting and listening to that place. And so for me, it really came from like that really embodied sort of being out and about and listening to messages from elders where they'd really broken things down. So for me, I feel like our law and our teachings are complexity in all its richness. But I feel like when you have good teachers and, elders, they make it seem so simple. And so I was walking along and thinking about thesis, and it was like, oh my God, it's the sis, it's sister. What? Like that's way too simple. But what it does is it reflects how I've been taught and how as blackfellas we understand the world is everything is living, this, microphone we might think of, it's man-made, contemporary created, but it's created from parts of country. So it contains spirit and livingness and sentience in parts of it as well. And there's no reason why that shouldn't be applied to a thesis, which in itself we've poured all this knowledge into and it's giving us knowledge. And so, yeah, I really took that and throughout the thesis played with it where the thesis as kin, sis would sort of pop up and ask questions and sort of hold me accountable as well along the way of where I was thinking.
I think that that idea of this holding to account to the work, it was part of what was really speaking to me as well. Like I felt this huge privilege and responsibility that I had been able to gather data, but the data was storying and time and heart and it was this idea that bringing it forward wasn't a means to an end. It wasn't to be able to then have a doctorate. It wasn't to just submit, the 80,000 words and pass some tests. It was to bring forward responsibly, respectably, and in ways that I would gladly be held to account for, storying and resources and gathering for us in the space. And you just articulated that so beautiful, and your writing it's often one of my favorites, and I feel very blessed to read it. So you have several degrees, including a doctorate, and yet you mentioned before not coming into this specific space because you were specifically seeking and yearning for geography. But what does it mean to you? Like, you've got these degrees. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I did an undergrad in international studies and international development, and then went away for many years and travelled and was working and got pretty frustrated in the space, was working in the NGO sector. And so for me, I went back and did a master's by coursework as a way to sort of take a bit of a break from, the labour force in that sense, and to really think about what I had experienced in that area and to learn more and to write about it. And during that just master's by coursework, it was a very short one, the amount that I got to read, and Linda Tuhiwai Smith says this so well, that as blackfellas in the academy, like, we read our set texts and our disciplinary things, but we're always reading above and beyond of, black academics who, doesn't matter what discipline we're in, we're all reading each other's work, which is what makes our work so rich and goes beyond boundaries because of that. So I was reading all this amazing work, and when I finished the master's, I was like, oh my God, I just had all these ideas and this yearning to think more and to have more time to think and read more of this work and not be distracted with other things to do that. So I enrolled in the doctorate, and that for me has epitomised how I see those degrees, and the doctorate is really about like a privilege to, like my doctorate took 5 years in the end, a privilege to have time, a privilege to engage in people's work, like things that people have been thinking about for years and they put in words. And, having a degree is about actually paying respect to all those people's work and to have the time carved out to engage with that. And I think that's incredible. So for me, that's what it represents. And I want to make sure now I've finished the doctorate that I carry that same spirit with me, because I do have concerns that I'll forget, and where you just sort of, doing smaller projects and working on multiple things. But I want to remember that ultimately for me as an academic, like, I want to be able to relish in people's work and to swim amongst the amazing ideas that blackfellas are putting into the world.
Yeah, I love that idea that it's work that requires and is grown through more reading. And as someone who grew up impoverished and was always having to hustle and grind, there was this really beautiful element, because I was working full time, doing the PhD, had small children at home, was writing my first book, but I could always justify reading because it was adding value to my work. It was enhancing my work, and I love that. And even though I'm less on the grind now and I'm able to prioritize rest more, and it's an entire less workload when you're no longer studying full time, but being able to say to myself, it's actually going to make your work better if you read, makes it feel so indulgent. And I love that. Like, at the moment, I've just read Serviceberry, which I know you're a fan of that book, and I've just started Bell Hook's All About Love, Reason to Love. I can't remember what it's called, but it's All About Love. I think that might be the title. And what I'm really enjoying is I've just read the chapter on how loving when it comes to child raising, and although Bell Hooks didn't birth any of her own children, she's involved in the raising of children, and she shares really beautifully on that. reading it and going, do you know what, actually, this reminds me of Professor Sana Nakata's work, and, shooting Sana a message and being like, oh, I was just reading this about the rights of children and how, children, respecting a child's rights is part of loving them, and immediately going, and that is being written about by this phenomenal Torres Strait Islander woman professor. And then that makes you go, actually, I haven't looked at her Google Scholar for a little while, and I'll go and read it and have a look. And, the Bell Hooks book that I'm reading, I picked up just for personal growth and for indulgence. And that's something I really love about the Academy, which leads me to...
Can I just add to that? You've actually just named a whole process that a year or two ago, Michelle Bishop and I, who's Gamilaroi scholar, we wrote a paper called Decolonising the Literature Review, a Relational Approach.
I haven't read this yet because I've been on maternity leave. I want to read that.
So you just articulated it, and what it was.
Oh, I love that. And I love Michelle.
Yes, we both were doing our PhDs and had to do the literature review, and we're like, oh, this is weird. And for me, I had such a focus in my thesis on relationality. And so I was like, oh, I'll write a lit review on relationality. So I was Googling relationality, and I was like, this is weird. Relationality as a concept and practice is not this. It's not Googling people's work.
Yeah.
And so I stopped writing the lit review, and we sort of got together and were like, oh, in all the amazing Indigenous research methodology work now, maybe there's another way of doing lit reviews. We found some things here and there, which are all documented in the paper, but we tried to articulate a process where it's exactly as you say. It's that relational approach that we all have, that we're all probably doing anyway, but naming it as a decolonising relational approach to conducting a literature review, where it's about who you know and what they're doing and how that relates to someone else, what they're doing, and how they introduce you to someone else's work through citation or through sending you something by email. And that as a more relational approach to finding literature.
I love this so much because this feels like a repeat of how we opened this episode where I was going, how do I articulate this? And then it was like, voila, actually here's a paper from Lauren, because I'm about to come off maternity leave, just had my third child, and I've got to do a literature review for my next project, which is also going to be a published book. And I've been thinking to myself, I started the lit review 18 months ago before I went on leave, and I was coming up against this doesn't quite fit what I'm thinking. What I'm seeing doesn't name the relationality of gathering and speaking to this space. And so I was literally next week, that's on my list of, I have to go and look for this. I'm going to have to come up with a name to, a way to articulate myself. And now I don't have to, because I'll be able to read that paper, and I already have no doubt that is going to be perfect. So that's wonderful. Oh, that's so lovely. That's really nice. I'm really excited to read that. So why do you choose to be an academic? Why do you choose to give your knowledge and your time and your heart to this space?
I think for me it is about knowledge and stories. So as you were talking about your thesis as being this vessel, this cradle to hold and share story, I think that's why I like being in academia. That's why I love research and teaching as well. So I see research exactly as you articulated as this really wonderful way to hold and gather story, and teaching as a way to disseminate story. And so for me, the struggle recently has been, how do I continue my community obligations and my family obligations and continue my research obligations? And more I'm trying to tie them together so that I can do both. I have to be very wary of that because of the extraction of the academy, the extractive nature of how Indigenous knowledges are sought after and monetised and extracted. So I have to do it very carefully. But what I do love about being in academia is that it is possible. It is possible for me to go and spend time on country and that be part of my job. And it is possible for me to write and think with other mob and write that up in a way that might be appealing to share with other mob, or to talk about different aspects of country, or to plan for the future, and that be part of my job.
Yeah. I love that. I think as well, part of the value, like where you're talking about being able to spend time on country as people who live off our ancestral countries, to be able to then have that recognized in part of the workload is one way that that then like serves me in my heart. And then while I am out on country, being able to have that quiet time with my community, with mob, and to listen to them and to hear. I have no idea if it's going to break through, but my baby's crying right now, but they're with their other parent, they're fine. But if it breaks through, don't worry if you can hear that. Because we're filming this in my home. So, for relationality, there you go. But being out on country, for example, like when we go out to the Welle, when we go to camp, listening and hearing, okay, mob who don't necessarily live on the coast, don't necessarily live in cities, but are doing the really important work, the language work, for example, is something I'm thinking of. And they're discussing, say, resources. They want to create resources and being able to be like, well, actually, I think I have access to some resources or some tools or some programs or some grants where I can then do that linking work, and trying to guard that carefully so that I'm not facilitating a connection that's going to be extractive or harmful, but also going, okay, if this is what I have access to, how can I best service the interests and the desires of everyone in that space? And I love that we have roles that allow us to even try that. Like, I think that's so special. I'm very focused on community at the moment in terms of how do we spend our time, or what can we do to build our community in a period of growing unrest and strain. And that leads me to my last question, which I got from Instagram. So one of my bawas on Instagram, I put up what would you like to know? Because Blacademia is a little unfunded podcast that started in 2019, pre-COVID, when not everyone had a microphone. And so season 1's quality is horrendously bad because I did not know what I was doing. I still don't. I'm relying heavily on my partner actually for making this come together well. But it's a podcast that does get listened to quite a bit. It gets reasonable amounts of streams still, because even though the quality's terrible, mob want to hear other mob and want to get insights from those of us that are in the space. And so I did put it out on socials for some questions that people might want to know. And one of them that I thought would go really well with you, knowing your heart in the way that I do, is what's a lesson that you've learned from an elder that you bring into your teaching and your research?
Yeah. So I've had elders really try and ask me, so what is it that you do? And so for me, because I said I'm in geography, but a lot of my research is around cultural land management. It's about Indigenous research methodologies, mainly around fire and cultural fire. So I've had elders be like, so how do you do that from a desk at a university? And it's been really challenging. And to sort of say, well, how do we do it from a desk at a university? They're right. And so for me, two of the biggest things I've had from elders that really impact who I am and how I operate in academia are remembering that if we're working with Indigenous knowledges, we can't just do that from a desk in a university. And that is acknowledging that everywhere is country, but we can't do it on our own. And also elders who have said, you've got to remember, in terms of Bush University, you're just at the start.
Yeah.
And so that reminder that, we might have these doctorates and we might be in the university and we might be moving up in the university, but that holds nothing when it comes to our roles in community. And as that elder put it, Bush University, that, we're just preschoolers and we're just bubbers. And so that's really grounding, and that's been really important in carrying who I am and what my roles are.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I love that reminder of, I suppose hierarchy is a funny word for it, but hierarchy, that idea of where does your learning and your skill set sit, and what value is placed on it. Like when we're out at camp, my biggest brag isn't that I have these degrees. It's that Auntie Iris lets me in the kitchen, like in the camp kitchen, because there's strict rules about like who can come in, but I'm allowed to help with the scones. Like that's, you know, that means so much to me. That's being trusted. And, you know, you then get all those sideways conversations and relationality, and it's really beautiful. And I think maybe people outside of our communities and outside of this intersection of identity might find that to be confusing, but like knowing how to make the TOL is kind of a big deal. Whereas if like in the academy, if I was expected to like make everyone's tea in like a regular setting, I don't know how I would feel about that. Like maybe in my department, because I work mostly with mob, but in like just a general department, if they're like, Amy, make the tea, I'd be like, check yourself. But I love that. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing, is those reminders that we get gifted from our elders as well. And their love, which comes both as encouragement and challenging reminders sometimes. So thank you so much for coming and sharing with us on Blacademia.
Yeah, thank you.
And I adore you, and I'm really excited to read your next papers.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Yalu.